You just keep
You gotta-
screwing up.
Okay. Oh my god. Okay.
At a price point of $550 Canadian or approximately $400 US, let's see what this unit can achieve.
What is the Cambridge Audio AX series? The goal of this series is to help the hi-fi curious crowd build their first system. This is the AXA35 integrated amplifier. MSRP of $559.99 Canadian. This amp boasts 35 watts per channel, an integrated moving magnet phono stage for turntable lovers, and a clean aesthetic. As Cambridge's entry-level line, will this outstanding value for money suffice those curious about hi-fi? We're excited to find out. Welcome to Hi-Fi. I'm Marcos, this is Kurt, and today we're talking about the Cambridge Audio AXA35. The AXA35 is a 35 watt per channel integrated amplifier, featuring a moving magnet phono stage and 4 RCA inputs, a 3.5 millimeter auxiliary input, a nice remote, and it's super nice and clean.
One thing I wish it had was Bluetooth. That way, if you first just got it, took it out of the package, at least you can start using it right away. Overall, the big one?
Yeah. What big one are we talking about?
The overall build quality is really good at this price point. You know, they did a little neat things on there to make it seem more premium. You can see that they had a plastic, kind of like little plastic face on there, but they almost just cladded it with aluminum, and it just makes it almost look like one solid piece. What you don't see on the surface is some of the internals. At this price range, it's surprising what they can achieve. You know, you have a toroidal transformer. Usually at that range, you're going to see one of those cheaper spec transformers. You can see they're using quite good parts in here.
As a knobs and buttons guy, I think the AXA did a really good job. They have all these nice little buttons here to select your inputs, a nice easy to find volume control knob. I do like that they added a 1/4 inch headphone output as well.
Easy to find volume control. Okay, makes sense. I'll give you that.
Okay. One thing I like about the AXA, it fits in many different decors, and I like that it has a black and white LCD screen. It doesn't make it look really dated. Overall performance-wise, the AXA35 I found performed really well. I did find there was a little bit of top-end shine, but overall pretty neutral. I feel like we were kind of pushing its limits a little bit. Our reference speakers are a little bit too much for this amplifier. The PMCs tend to suck up quite a bit of power.
I agree. I think it's just because it's a little bit more difficult to drive, and that's why we just to make sure we took some measurements, and you can see that instead of the bass a lot of times being elevated, it kind of dipped in this speaker.
If you've been following our videos, you may have noticed our PMCs in the background. We use these speakers to listen to every single amplifier as our baseline,
just to keep it as controlled as possible. The overall soundstage was good. You can localize and hear everything where it is. What I just did find though, the perception of depth maybe wasn't there as much as you would hear even in a higher end product. However, it was still good. And I'll touch on, when we listen to the music part, on I think reasons why kind of got that impression in this amplifier.
When it came to listening to the AXA35 at lower volume levels, around 60 decibels, conversation level, I found it had a really good presentation. It was lively, it had a pretty good amount of bass, and I could still hear everything in the music.
Of course, to be expected at its rated power output, I would say comfortable wise, it was happy between 79 to 81. I would say at its peak with these particular speakers. When you start to pass the 80 dB marks, that's when I think it does start to break down a little bit. Everything kind of starts getting more distorted and collapse. One thing is when we did those quick measurements, it does have a little bit between 6 to 8K frequency range. It's got a little bit extra on top, I noticed, with this amplifier, and so at loud volumes it just sometimes becomes maybe a little bit too much.
We decided to push the AXA35 to see what its true peak was on our PMCs, and it hit a peak of around 89 decibels, and that's really where it started kind of really falling.
That's really pushing it for this amplifier.
Around 82 decibels at its peak, it was pretty good.
Yeah.
When it came to listening to music on the AXA35, we listened to a pretty wide genre. The first song that stood out for us, Sarah McLachlan, Angel. I have always been a big fan of this song. I always find it very engaging, and with the AXA35, I still found it to be very engaging. It did sound like she was in maybe a little bit smaller hall. I still found like I was in the room. It still had really nice detail and resolution as well.
Just to go back what you were saying about the room, in this recording, the way they did the reverb and everything, it's supposed to actually sound a little bit larger. It takes a certain type of intricacy and refinement in an amplifier, especially in this song, to almost feel like it engages you, because she's just got this, her voice is really, it's meant to captivate you and be emotional. And that's what I like. An amplifier at this price range, it still did an excellent job just getting you into the music. And to touch upon, you mentioned in the room, the one thing is where I would say, compared to say maybe something in a different price point, a higher price point or a different level, is when you're talking about the room, it's supposed to be a large room. The way they did kind of the echo and the reverb in this, when you really listen to it, it sounds quite large. One thing that I found is, it takes a certain amount, a level of having a low noise floor and detail to really capture, all that reverb and make it sound a lot larger. So that's why I think it's something like this. It sounds a little bit smaller, but in general, again, I'm just nitpicking at this price point. It still did an awesome job.
The second song that stood out to us, something a little bit more lighthearted from Flight Facilities, the song Heavy off their new album. This song is pretty dancey, a little bit poppy, and what I found with the AXA, it had pretty impactful bass and really clean vocals and synths. Like, the drums were very clean, the cymbals and hi-hats were really well presented.
Very similar to the Sarah McLachlan track. When you listen to this, imaging is very well placed. You can hear things when her vocals, when she's coming and they pan her voice to the sides. You can distinctly hear where everything was positioned, and where her from center. It placed everything well. One thing that I was realizing this track, very similar to Sarah's, is again maybe not the same amount of depth. And I was thinking about it, and I was wondering, why could that be? I noticed that, and we measured it just to make sure, validate it. Between the kind of starting at the 6 to 9, the frequency range starts to lift in this amplifier a little bit. The way your brain perceives stuff between whether it's kind of like light, between like detailed and not detailed, that's how it perceives depth. And picking up on whether they're using reverb or room mics, those kind of details, those all come together to give you this illusion of depth. And because a lot of the frequencies were heightened, that contrast, you lost that contrast. And I think that was just part of the reason on this amplifier. And that's the only thing, one thing I would hear going from an amplifier like this and maybe to one of its older siblings.
No, Kurt, I think you're being a little too critical of the 35. When you look at its price, its overall performance is excellent at this price range.
Yeah, I'll admit sometimes I do that. I do gotta turn it off, and when I think of it, yes, it's just my, I don't know, maybe that just starting to kind of maybe nitpick on it. But when I go back, I will go by, I agree with you, and overall, when you look at everything else, at this range, it is an awesome performer.
Yes. We recommend the AXA35 for somebody who's first getting into hi-fi. This is an awesome amp to start off with. The fact that it has a moving magnet phono stage really makes it for me. One thing I do really like about it as well, there is a charging port so you can charge your phone too. So keeping in mind its low-ish power rating of 35 watts per channel, when you do buy your speakers, try to get something a little bit more efficient.
I was just thinking of it for a bit here, and I really realized at that price range, what is there? There's not very much, and especially something with that kind of build quality and using really good parts, the donut-looking transformer in there. It's something that you really don't see at this price range very often. Yes, you may not have the power at some of those other units at that price range. However, that the quality is going to be much better, and I'd rather have really quality watts than
raw power.
Exactly. The good thing is with a lot of manufacturers now, the speaker manufacturers releasing really good products at entry price points. This is going to be well suited for a lot of those. So we have the Dolly that we're going to review here later on, and the Triangle, the Bora 3s. You have the Keo Acoustic 3020, 3030s that I know is going to match well. There's lots, and there's going to be a lot of good speakers at that price point. Is going to match with this quite well.
If you want to watch one of our reviews on Cambridge Audio's higher end product, the Evo 150, click the link below. Like, subscribe, and thanks for watching.